BP Media's just for you and me.
WIFTVPN.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into MUWAKKIL'S world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's MUWAKKIL'S world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Here's Salim.
Good afternoon. This is Toussaint Werner filling in for Salim MUWAKKIL on MUWAKKIL'S world. Today we got a special guest, Dr. Lance Williams, author of The Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation. I don't know what's going on with Salim, man. He hasn't been around. I think he had surgery this week, man. So we want to send a special prayer to the brother Salim to make sure he's doing better. Hope all is well with you, man. Can't wait to see you get back into the studio. Today we wanted to get into a conversation with Dr. Lance, one about the book, The Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation. And I know last time you was in with Salim, you was talking about writing a book on the Gangster Disciples, if I was correct.
Yes, sir.
How far in that process are you?
Black Disciples.
Oh, the Black Disciples.
Yes,
Excuse
sir.
me. He's from 63rd, not 64th.
Hey, little brother need to get his addresses straight. He's 63rd.
Oh, he's 63rd, not
Nah,
64th.
but he did say 63rd. He was 64th, not 63rd, but he's from 63rd.
Yeah, how far along are you in that process?
Oh, it's finished. It's finished.
Oh, word? So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got a release date on it
It's
yet?
Not yet, but got the publishing lined up, so we're looking forward to getting it out in the next 6 months or so.
Man, that's super dope. That's super dope, brother. Those are some of the conversations we want to get into today. Just on a whole nother note, right?
Yes, sir.
So I've been struggling, Lance. I've been trying to write a book myself, right?
Okay.
And I'm not necessarily an author.
Yes,
you know what
are.
I mean?
Yes,
Like,
you are.
I'm trying to believe that.
Yes, you
You
are.
know what I mean? But I read you all stuff. I read some Ta-Nehisi, and I'm like, damn, man, my stuff don't sound like that. And I keep having revisions. And then when I talk to people who are authors, they just keep saying, just keep writing, just keep writing, just keep writing.
Yeah.
But I struggle every time I read my stuff back. It's like, this don't compete. You know what I
No,
mean?
well, it's a working process, and so I encourage you, as other brothers and sisters have, to keep writing. But the thing is to make sure you, after you write, get it to people that you trust who can give you some feedback on it. That's the process, of writing, right? So, writing is just crystallized thought, and what helps you crystallize the thinking is to put it down in writing and then share it with individuals close to you, and they give you feedback, and that's the process of solidifying everything. So
Yeah, I got a lot of Erica Badu with me, man. I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit.
Yeah,
you know
too.
what I mean?
Me too.
I got a lot of that in me. But, you bought a couple books in today. The Power Elite
Yes, sir.
and Preparing for Power.
Yes, sir.
And that's interesting because in context, the book I've been trying to write is I got a certain theory, right? I got a theory that says the most fundamental question in understanding black masculinity is, can you beat my ass though? And that's the working title of my book. Can you beat my ass though?
Yo, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And the theory, I think, is brilliant,
I think so too.
right? I think the theory is brilliant. And I'm trying to tell the story or create a narrative just around the experience of my own life, right? So it's not, I don't want to write it kind of like this academic understanding of masculinity. I want to write it in story form. And I'm struggling to get the message across in story form. But I know that's how, if I was to present this, let's just say to the young brothers on 63rd and not 64th, one, it's a struggle to get them brothers to read in the first place. But then if I get them to read, I don't want them to read something based or seared in academia because it'll, I don't think it'll gravitate to their interest. So I want to create it in the story form where they can get the message while heeding like an experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I say, again, it's different ways to express your writing, but writing is the foundation of the communication or mass communication. So, they may not read it, but if you write it, you can express it in other forms that is more comfortable for them. So let's say you write it, and then that writing becomes a foundation for a documentary, or it becomes a foundation for music, or it becomes a foundation for film or something like that, something that is palatable to them, But I struggle with the same thing. And so when we write, particularly brothers and sisters like ourselves, we're writing for legacy, we're writing for history, and then that it'll express itself, because what'll happen is one or two brothers and sisters will pick it up and read it, and then they will articulate it to the rest of the brothers and sisters. It's a storytelling process, but in order to preserve our stories, our powerful stories in our communities and experiences that we have, like the one that the theory of black masculinity that you're expressing, has to be written so that we can preserve it for longevity. And then don't worry about what happens to it after that. It will get out, because we got a great oral tradition among our people.
Yeah, that's the theory. I fully get it, right? And even when we come in here and do our shows, my perspective is one that's entrenched in that conversation of black masculinity. So it's almost like operating in reverse.
It's powerful.
Right? So oftentimes I'll come here, we'll do a show, and then I'll look at the show and say, well, that needs to be written down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to create that staple, but like I said, I've been struggling. But it was interesting to see that these were the specific books that you brought in, because in context, I think the question of power is kind of where we're losing our black men. Yes,
sir. It's at the core of the challenge going forward. Like, it's a lot of stuff that we talk about. We talk about, the violence that's in the community. We talk about gangs. We talk about, joblessness. We talk about, poor education. But really at the core of all of it is power, right? And in order to solve these, we have to be able to connect our people to power and to fix all of this other stuff that's going on. So, I think you're right on point. I think it's a conversation, working with, young brothers every day. That is the one conversation that captivates them. So you right on point in terms of what is relevant for them. They're interested in those. They're not interested in many other conversations beyond power. But a lot of people have not gotten to the point to understand that.
Yeah, and I think it's also a reimagining of the definition of power. Right? I think that we've kind of been entrenched in our community kind of in this beta understanding of power. And I think that's a remnant of our positioning in America since our inception. I think it's a remnant of slavery.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think in a lot of ways, when we start speaking about gangs and gang culture, I think that that's really in a lot of ways an exploration of black male power.
It is.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
And I think that denial of that, let me say this. I've been dealing with this other idea in writing the book. It came about in writing my thoughts down. I started dealing with this idea of invisibility from a masculine perspective.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that, are you aware of Dr. Tommy Curry?
No.
So Dr. Tommy Curry has a book called The Man Not. And in the book, The Man Not, he kind of explores all of these pathologies associated with black maleness. And he explores them from a historical context. And these stories that are being told are like, they just blow my fucking mind. It's like, damn, how was I not aware of this? Damn, how did I not know this? And that idea just kept coming up in my mind. It's like, our history has been erased specifically from a masculine perspective, right? And it creates this idea of not being seen by anyone. And essentially, by not being seen by anyone, it removes the possibility of humanity.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I wanted to explore that in the context of our desire and our aspirations toward power, just as a way to be seen.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and if I could add to that. So taking that premise, right, of invisibility and masculinity, imagine being a black male in the hood, right, and being invisible in your own hood, feeling that you have no status, you have no say. You really are looked at as, particularly if you're a street guy, right, that you've been disconnected from mainstream institutions from the time that you were a little boy. And that the psychology of that produces a lot of different things. It produces depression. It produces rage and anger, frustration, because you are not considered. No deference be, and that may not be a problem for some people, but particularly for young African American males who have the personality, type A personalities, who are naturally born aggressive. That's frustrating as hell. And what they end up doing is they end up lashing out, but lashing out at others like them because those are the only people in their proximity. And that's where the violence comes from.
I want you to hold that thought. I want to explore that a little bit more deeply. We got to go to a quick break. Again, you are rocking with MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is Dr. Lance Williams. We'll be right back.
Yes, sir.
WIFTBPM.
This is retired State Senator Ricky Hendon. This is my new song, Be My Christmas. It's on my House Party CD, produced by house music icon King Farley. It's available on my website, HollywoodHendon.com. And this is our new song, We Getting Lit. The album also has songs like Rona Money. Get the House Party CD in time for Christmas and New Year's Eve.
This is the king of house music, Farley Jack Master Funk, and I endorse Hollywood Ricky Hendon. Let's go to work.
The Chicago Legal Network is the collaboration of attorneys that concentrate in many areas of the law most needed in Chicago neighborhoods. The CLN lawyers focus on personal injury, criminal defense, and other issues. The CLN lawyers all average over 20 years of legal experience and are dedicated to helping the Chicago community. The Chicago Legal Network is committed to developing black lawyers through mentorship and co-representation. So if you were injured in a car accident, slip and fall, or injured on the job, or you need assistance with criminal defense, including driving violations and DUI, check out ChicagoLegalNetwork.com for more information or call 773-912-3545. 773-912-3545.
Hey family, this is Dawn Millhouse from the Book of Dawn. Christmas and holiday time means giving to me. Make certain that you give of yourself to somebody else. This is Dawn. Happy holidays from the Book of Dawn.
WIFTBPM.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into MUWAKKIL'S world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's MUWAKKIL'S world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Watch out now.
Here's Salim.
We are back. You are listening to MUWAKKIL'S World. Again, I am Toussaint Werner. To the right of me is my brother, Dr. Lance Williams, author and all-around great dude. So before we went on break, we was talking about this concept of invisibility in regards to like black masculinity, and Lance went into that a little bit deeper. And one of the things you mentioned was, you start to suffer like a raft of depression, and you accumulated some other, you associated some other behavior sets with that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to explore that a little more deeply, and to figure out how that kind of like plays out on the street level. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me one of my favorite tools in teaching is this book right here. It's a book called The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills. Okay. Right, and in his book, there's a statement that I think kind of summarizes or establishes a foundation for some of this that we're talking about. So check this out. In his book on page 172, he's actually quoting another scholar who says that he says that in any society, in any society, this reads, that there is a sort of quota of men who, when appropriately provoked, will resort to violence. So let me start with that. So in regardless of what society it is, we're talking about the hood, we're talking about mainstream, we're talking about the corporate community, we're talking whatever. In every society, there is sort of a quota. And when they say sort of a quota, he's saying a small number of men, if you appropriately provoke them, will resort to violence. So this is in any society, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says if we give such men genius and historical opportunity, we will get a Napoleon. Now, again, this is written in a Western European context, so for them, Napoleon is a hero. We don't necessarily see him as a hero, but they see him as a military genius.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying if you give these type of men genius, if you establish that they're geniuses and you give them the right historical opportunity, you'll get somebody like a great military leader, right, out of this group of men. It says if we give them a great ideal, then we will get a Garibaldi. He was one that kind of Italian that kind of brought the Italians together,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you give them a great ideal. He says if we give them a chance and nothing else, we'll get a Mussolini. You know, Mussolini was a dictator who was a beast. He went around trying to conquer the whole world, but he also ended up killing his own people. But he was one of these men who only had a chance and nothing else. We got a Mussolini. Now check this out. He said if we give them, or we may add in a business civilization, you get a gangster. So all of these individuals, the gangster, the dictator, the great military leader, the great diplomat, they're all the same individual, just with different
opportunities.
Different opportunities and different levels of knowledge and training, right? So these same brothers that's out on the corner on 63rd, as you mentioned, in many cases, have the same potential as a Napoleon or a great leader if they're given the right knowledge and the right training. And the problem is for us in the black community is that we don't control any of the institutions that produce great leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We don't control our educational systems. We don't control the economy. We don't control the political systems. And those are the institutions that you need in order to produce the types of leaders that are going to defend and protect the community.
I would agree with that. But see, I got a little bit of pushback.
Okay.
I think, at least in the way the book is describing those men,
Right.
I think that all of those men are necessary.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
At every level.
Right.
Right. So I'm a student of Amos Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Amos talks about manhood being something to be achieved.
Yes.
Right. It's not a natural thing. You don't just grow into manhood. Right.
Yes.
And part of that achievement is mastering the environment in which you were born into.
Yes, sir.
Right. So if you was born into a kind of a hunter-gatherer society, until you master being a hunter-gatherer, you don't achieve manhood. You know what I mean? And if you never master it, you never achieve manhood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when you think about it from our perspective as being black in America, we were born into this kind of oppressive society, right? And in order for us to reach manhood, then our goal has to be conquering this oppressive society, right? And when you think about all of those men, part of the narrative is conquer. You know what I mean? So when I was listening to that, what I kept hearing in my head was Toussaint L'Ouverture and D. Salim.
Yes.
And the counterbalance between those two.
Yes.
Right? Toussaint was brilliant, depending on how you look at it, right? Because I got some reservations about Toussaint in some kind of way sometimes, too.
Okay.
Like, I think Toussaint in a lot of ways was like the Barack Obama of his time, and that kind of bothers me.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Even though that's my namesake, right? But D. Salim was kind of like, I hear that shit, but let's kill him up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I kind of aligned my spirit more with the D. Salim philosophy.
Yes.
Now I can understand the balance of the two.
Right.
Right. But in the end of the story, Toussaint suffered the greatest losses because he had the most bend in his philosophy. You know what I mean? And I think the very nature and the very essence of manhood must force some level of threat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And once you force that level of threat, you must be able to back that threat up. So when you start to backtrack or operate within that we are the world kind of philosophy, those opposing threats find opportunity to take advantage of you.
Absolutely.
You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Right. And so I agree with that 100%. And those men, to me, as I mentioned, the point that I was trying to make in it and what I got out of it is they're all the same individual, only like you said, different. They had different opportunities. Some had chances, some had. But what happens is if you produce one that has nothing but a chance in a business civilization, and you get a gangster, then his leadership, in order to defend and protect his community, is somewhat limited, is marginalized. You know, so what the gangster does is the gangster is seeking power in the underground economy. Mm-hmm. Ain't no way you can't say that Trump ain't a gangster. It's just
Absolutely.
that gangster is Trump is using his gangsterism within the legal economy. Mm-hmm. It's no different than the brother on the street, and that's why you see a lot of people were really confused with why young brothers were attracted to Trump to a certain degree, because they recognize that same energy, same spirit, right? Mm-hmm. Politics aside, they saw that energy and they were attracted to it, right? But I agree with what you're saying, and it takes all types in order to have a full-fledged civilization or society that's functioning for, the people.
That's an interesting viewpoint, right? Mm-hmm. In regards to the context of Trump. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if when we juxtapose Trump's energy and the criminality associated with it, because it is criminality associated with it, right? It's like, I guess I'd like to ask, do you think that our inability to see, and it's easy to identify Trump as criminal and criminality.
Yes.
But I think if you associate the other 44 presidents with him, you can find that same energy.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just articulated better.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Or expressed differently.
Expressed differently.
Yes, sir.
Right? And I'd wonder if our inability to see that criminality in that position, per se, is that based in our affinity to whiteness? Or is our inability to shun our youth based in our lack of identity? You understand?
Yeah, no, I think it's both. Because that model of identity is particularly related to a white male identity, how it's expressed, right? So when we look at white male identity, that puts white supremacy at the top level of value in terms of what they value more, right? The problem is when you look at white supremacy as the most valued commodity, so to speak, in society, then that trickles down to the rest of society that is controlled by that force, which means that even those who are oppressed by white supremacy will adopt it and accept it as their identity of manhood, right? And so anything that's related to your own self and your identity as a black male is expressed through white supremacy. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's, I hope that doesn't get too esoteric, but basically if we look at so basically in the streets is just a base level expression of the sweets. Mm-hmm. It's just a lower level expression of it. And the reason that the level is lower is because we have less access to institutions to make it look nice.
Yeah, man. I want to explore that idea a little bit deeper. We got to go to another break. You are rocking with Toussaint Werner and Dr. Lance Williams. This is Salim MUWAKKI'L's World. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
WIFTBPN.
Shop at Black-owned and operated Solo Beauty, where you are appreciated and respected. Located at 8158 South Cottage Grove, Solo Beauty can supply all of your black hair care needs. Solo Beauty is open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., Tuesday through Saturday.
Food, culture, impact. What's in it for the Black People Media is proud to support The Woodlawn, located at 1200 East 79th Street. The Woodlawn is an innovative economic center for the entire family. Stop by and try our jerk-inspired menu. Plus, get details on our new Igloo dining experience. Restaurant, event space, cultural space. For more info about reservations or our COVID-19 friendly space, visit us online at www.thewoodlawn1200.com.
Hey, you wanna hear something that exciting? You know what I found her last night. Just when Mama turned out the light. Claus is a black man. Santa Claus is a black man and he's handsome like my daddy too. Santa Claus is a black man. Santa Claus is a black man and I found out. That's why I'm telling you. Mama must have met Santa Claus before, 'cause he started dancing all over the floor, and I fell asleep at the door. Santa Claus is a black man.
Ron, what is that you was playing, brother? That sound like Sesame Street music.
Hey, did you listen to the words though?
I didn't. What was
Santa
it?
Claus is a black man. I like that.
Oh, okay. Santa Claus is a myth. That's what that is. My daddy was Santa Claus. Of course, he was a black man. You are tuned in to MUWAKKIL'S world. Again, man, I am Toussaint Werner. I am sharing the mics today with Brother Lance Williams. We've been getting to these offline discussions that are, in a lot of ways, more interesting than the online discussions. So we wanted to bring in some ideas that we was talking about offline. One of the things that Lance spoke about before we went to break was white supremacy being a valued commodity in our community. And offline, that turned into a conversation about how I struggle with the idea of revolting against that in which you love.
Yes, sir.
You know, and Lance was speaking to that in context, so we wanted to bring that back to the mics.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're looking at the forces that govern the society that we live in, you always have to go first to the values that drive the ideals of society that make or define, you know, our reality, right? And so at the core of that, as we were mentioning, is white supremacy. It is the most valued social commodity in the society that we live. Everything revolves around that, right? And so what happens from there is the mainstream institutions, whether they be your faith institutions, whether they be your economic, your mass media institutions, your defense institutions, these major institutions, did I say educational? All of these major institutions then are to sustain that value of white supremacy. Everybody is pushing that, right? And as it pushes that and it manufactures it, then the rest of society begins to see that the only way through to success is to chase that value. Now, as you mentioned, for us, that's a dilemma. That's a dilemma because that same force is oppressing us. So what you end up doing in the society that's driven by white supremacy is you chase the value of white supremacy for your own identity, and then that works to your actual demise.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I was saying before, you know, when we was offline is that I have an easier time articulating that message to, let's say, the young brother on 63rd Street than I do to a lot of the brothers that are operating in these suites or in these political offices, right? And it kind of contends or creates this paradigm where once you start to reap the benefits of said society, you reject all of the failure that came before that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And essentially you leave the rest of us behind.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Going back to that theory of being a student of Amos Wilson.
Yes.
Right? Amos says you cannot be a man without the we.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So if you leave or levy the group, even if you levy the group for your own personal benefit, that is kind of obtuse to being or achieving manhood, right? Now, for me, this goes back to identity.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because we don't have this kind of group construct. We do, but it's an enforced kind of thing.
And could I let me just, because that's a perfect segue to this piece I wanted to bring in. It's a book called Preparing for Power, America's Elite Boarding Schools, right?
Let's get it.
And what it does is it gives you a very detailed, behind-the-scenes look at how the power elite, those individuals that you mentioned, how they prepare the next generation for power, right? Which is something I think we need to be
incorporate.
About, right? And so they use these boarding schools that they send particular types of boys to. Trump went to a boarding school. Bush and those kind of guys went to boarding schools, right? Because boarding schools allow what we call deep structure regulation, basically a very intense process of socialization, right, into identity, right? That's the whole purpose, to drive home for these little white boys and some black boys, because they bring black boys into these spaces too, right, to reinforce this idea of white male supremacy, right? But check this out. This is what they say in this book. They said the first thing you must realize, and you just said this, they said the first thing you must realize, and this is what they teaching these little white boys, right? The first thing you must realize is that power is collective. The individual only has power insofar as he ceases to be an individual, right? And so what they do is they ain't worried about if you can read or if you can write, if you strong or weak, because they recognize, as you were saying earlier, that it is important. The full spectrum of humanity is needed in order for you to exercise your privilege. You gotta have the weak, the strong. You gotta have the smart. You gotta have everybody. Got to be in it, right? So don't worry about where you fit in, but just recognize that you're a part of something. You're a part of collective, right? Right, and that what we do as black folks, we do just the opposite. We tell our kids, go to school, listen to what that teacher tell you to do, and so you can get a good education, so you can get a good job. And so we're preparing our young people to be successful individuals, when in reality ain't no such thing. That the only success is success as a collective. And so then what they say is the preservation of privilege requires the exercise of power, and those who exercise it cannot be too squeamish about the injuries that the ensuing conflict imposes on the losers, right? The people who founded the American boarding schools understood this, right? And they had look, this is a hard world. And you see it expressed in people like Trump and Bush and them when they come like, look, this ain't about what I think. This is about the interest of the collective. And if I got to be, take the hit for everybody, I'll take the hit for everybody. But we moving as a collective. And so for us, you were talking about the young brother, the brother who might want to use the tools of capitalism to be successful versus the brothers in the hood. Well, the reason that you got that different expression is because the brothers who are using capitalism and feel like they could, it's because they feel closer to the levers of power. And so they think that they could grasp it as an individual. It's almost like fool's gold. It's like it's close. The brothers in the hood, they ain't nowhere near close to it. They can't see it. So they clear when you bring this to them, hey, I hear what you said. And that's why they form what we call street organizations or gangs.
But to that point, though, to the point of the book,
yes,
the brothers in the hood really have a clear understanding.
I think so.
You understand?
I think so.
They have
and that's the danger of them. That's the danger.
I think it's the beauty of them.
It is, if you look at it from an internal perspective. So we just looking at it from two different perspectives. I'm looking at it externally as the enemy to the community. When they see them, they like, man, we got to do something about this. Internally, you can see the beauty of it.
See, for me, it makes me question which one of those are the enemy to the community, right? And I mean it in this context. I get it. I think they're misguided in their direction of where they exploit the people, right?
And if they're misguided, they become a danger to themselves and their people.
That's true. But it's also, I think a lot of that misguidedness is based on the misguided of the other class of our community, right?
Yeah, to a certain
So
degree,
nobody's operating in concert.
No, I agree.
Right? So when I go back to that indivisible kind of construct, that upper crust class of us, they don't see 63rd Street.
Yes.
You have no value to me, right? So the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And when that happens, it's like the brother on 63rd, you not a part of this either, right?
Yeah.
You are just as much a threat to me as this white man.
That's true.
You understand what I'm saying? So in essence, when we look at let's say a King Von, for example, right? Who's noted for doing with all the things that he's done.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes,
so
sir.
if you know anything about Chicago street culture, you know that boy got some bodies under his belt.
Yeah.
I don't know how many. I don't know what the fact is.
Yeah.
I don't know if the number's true.
Yeah.
But he did some work in these streets.
Yes, sir.
Right? But he's also noted for when he got his first $100,000, the first thing he did was come back to Parkway and hand out money to his people.
Yes, sir.
And he left out of there without a dime. Kind of what Amos says is necessary to become a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, that you brought up King Von. this new book that I have is called, right now the working title is King David and the Mayor. And really what it does is telling the history of the black disciples, black gangster disciples, through the lens of David Barksdale, the king, right, of the black disciples. And I found a real interesting in the archives, and it's interesting because a lot of the history of the streets has been tucked away in museum basements. Like a lot of the letters and knowledge and communication between guys that were in leadership positions are not privy to the general public. I get a chance to get to some of it because of my position as a professor at the university, so I get access to some of this stuff. And it's a letter that David wrote that kind of speaks to what you were just saying. And he was, in this letter, it was an open letter to the community. And what he was complaining about was how the black disciples were at the time, they were just called, at that time they were not called black disciples. You know, black disciples was an evolution of them moving from the devil's disciples. They started off with devil's disciples, and then they dropped devils and became disciples, and then added black disciples, and then later when they brought Larry and the men,
Black
they became
gangster disciples.
Black gangster disciples. And then there was, after David's death, there was a fissure and a split in the organization, and that's where you get the BDs and the GDs from, right? So they go through different. But this, in this letter, he is speaking to how, exactly what you were saying, how he was seeking the support from the overall black community. And he was complaining how the black community had abandoned them and had basically, threw them to the wolves and let the police come in and brutalize them and knock his teeth out. He was complaining about how he was trying to break up a fight and the police came in and, just abused him as if he was nobody, and he was saying, he was warning the community. He said, look, we want to help. We want to do good. We recognize we have problems with the Stones, but we recognize that they strong like us. He said, but look, if y'all don't support us and help us do better, then we will become your devil, and we will go from door to door knocking, letting you know who we are. So we're asking you, please help us. We want to help. We want to do better. We know we've made some mistakes. He was trying to atone, right, for the problems that they had caused, but at the same time, we trying to do better too.
It's the African proverb, right? A child that's not embraced by the village will burn it down to fill its warmth.
And that's what he said.
That's the realest thing.
And remember, these are brothers that never, he ain't never went to high school. That's
Jeff couldn't read.
That's what they said.
But gumption is a motherfucker.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yes. Which goes back to the working title of my book, Can You Beat My Ass, though?
And that's what it's about.
It legitimately is in my perspective, too, right? So it's interesting that you brought up that letter from David Barksdale, because in context, what it brings me to, and this is kind of when I had this kind of change in philosophy about the entirety of the American paradigm.
Yeah,
I can't remember the police officer's name when Mike Brown was killed. I forget his name.
Yeah, I don't know his name.
I forget his name. But in essence, he was in Ferguson, Missouri. Ferguson is as big as Woodlawn, if that. Like, it's a very small blip on the map, right? The dude, the police officer himself wasn't special. He wasn't related to the mayor. He wasn't related to somebody in city council. He was just a regular $30,000, $28,000 white boy police officer.
I'm glad you said that.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And them brothers in Ferguson was like, shit, we ready to go to war. Like, they was legitimately walking down the streets with AK-47s. They was really ready to go to war. Yes. Right? And that was a different energy from our community. So in my mind, I said, in chess, you'll throw away a pawn to secure the board. Darren Wilson, that's his name.
Okay.
Darren Wilson was merely a pawn. And they decided that he wasn't worth throwing away. And I said, oh, shit, the paradigm has shifted. We got to take a quick break. I want you to dig into that a little bit further when we come back from break, because that changes the context of the totality of America to me.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
You are tuned in to MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is my brother Lance Williams. We'll be right back.
WIFTBPM.
Hey family, this is Lisa E. from the Book of Dawn, and I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season, and be safe. We love you.
The Chicago Legal Network is the collaboration of attorneys that concentrate in many areas of the law most needed in Chicago neighborhoods. The CLN lawyers focus on personal injury, criminal defense, and other issues. The CLN lawyers all average over 20 years of legal experience and are dedicated to helping the Chicago community. The Chicago Legal Network is committed to developing black lawyers through mentorship and co-representation. So if you were injured in a car accident, slip and fall, or injured on the job, or you need assistance with criminal defense, including driving violations and DUI, check out chicagolegalnetwork.com for more information or call 773-912-3545. 773-912-3545.
Now you can join MUWAKKI'L's World on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11 to 1 on What's in It for the Black People Media.
WIFTBPM.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into MUWAKKI'L's world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's MUWAKKI'L's world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Watch out now. Here's Salim.
Welcome back to MUWAKKI'L's World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is my brother Lance Williams. Before we went on break, we was getting to a conversation about context, right?
Yeah.
And the shift in the, at least in my mind, the shift in the American paradigm when Mike Brown was shot in Ferguson and how Darren Wilson wasn't brought up on charges. And I just thought that was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I usually can, in all of those high-profile cases, I can usually, before they happen or before the case is like finalized, I can say this is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
When the Darren Wilson situation came about, I thought that was special, not because he had killed Mike Brown or that was any different than any of the other police officer shootings, but because of the reaction from the brothers in the streets in Ferguson.
Yeah.
And I said, man, this will sort of like George Floyd, right? George Floyd sparked the kind of energy that thought Mike Brown was going to spark.
Yes.
Right? And I thought it would have been much easier for the white power structure to abandon Darren Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's easy to abandon him. They abandon him. That shuts off all that energy. We go back to being docile.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But when they decided not to abandon Darren Wilson, I said, man, you know, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because that's a shift in the paradigm. You
Right.
know, we really don't give a shit at this point, you know?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because I think, you know, in terms of masculinity, in the context of black masculinity versus white masculinity, and you brought up the whole issue of the police, which I think is something that's really important to take into consideration as we think about a lot of the brutality that's going on in our community, right? So I had this conversation with young brothers a lot, trying to explain to them, like in a social context, who the police are, right? That's got to be taken into consideration. And I'm not saying every single white police or black police. I'm just talking about in general. Sociologically, we can show that the majority of police officers in urban spaces, white police officers, tend to come from working class families, lower socioeconomic working class families of white males. And again, white male supremacy is the number one commodity in American society. So you should, as a white, if you're white, you born a white male, there's a certain level of privilege that comes along with that you should benefit from.
Absolutely.
There's an elevated, you get a head start. So, of course, in any structure like that, you're going to have first and you're going to have last. And what happens in this society is that there are a group of white males that are lower on the socioeconomic scale. And in this society, many of them, because they can't benefit from the privilege of being white males, they get the leftovers. And what are the leftovers for white men? Jobs as police,
Mm-hmm.
jobs as firefighters, jobs in streets and sanitation. These are white males who basically are not able to do. Now, they give them hero status to appease them, to say, hey, you one of us. But the reality is that they getting treated just like niggas too.
You know what's funny, Lance? Right before we walked in here today, Maisie was outside having a conversation about the first thing you learn in management 101 is that when someone asks you for more money, what you do is give them another title.
You give them a title.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the conversation that you're having right now is a conversation that I often have, and I say that, all white men are offered a cushion, right? And that cushion is exactly what you said. No matter what, you can fall. What you can fall on the police department. No matter what, you can fall on the fire department. And in all those positions, man, they're almost guaranteed to hit at least $100,000.
Yeah.
Right? When you do the basic math on the economics in our community, to be
which is just enough maybe to afford to live comfortably in an urban center like Chicago, but maybe not even enough.
But here's the game though, right? On the back end of that, to be in the top 1% of income earners in our community, it only takes $120,000.
Absolutely.
So their floor is our ceiling.
Yes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
In context, I don't think we recognize that.
Yes, absolutely. So, but I think what it does is it explains the tension between white police officers and the black community. Because what happens is, here is a white male who already psychologically is struggling as seeing himself as a failure in white society. He went to the military. Like, if you look at the background of many police officers that got military background in corrections, the military. If you're a white male, let's just be honest. If you're a white male, you end up in the military.
You failed.
You failed.
That's real.
But what they do is they give them this patriotic status as you a hero, you fighting for the country. Come on, man. In that context, you're a failure. So what happens is you get to come home, you get to be the police, you get to be the authority, you can take life, right? But you really feel like a failure psychologically. And the money that you get early in your career ain't really enough for you to afford to live in the city that you saying you serving. So now you get a lot of anxiety, you get anger, you get frustration. Now you thrown into the hood, to police the hood, where there is anxiety, and it's constantly thrown in your face. Man, I'll whoop your ass if you ain't had that gun. So now you're being challenged. Your authority is being challenged even more. Your manhood and dignity is being challenged even more. So now somebody like that who feels like a failure, but also has the authority to take your life, is a dangerous individual. And then on top of that, feeling like they ain't got enough money to take, which they really don't make enough money to take care of their family, send their kids to college and that type of thing. They're angry. That's why you get such high rates of suicide, domestic violence. I mean, suicide and domestic violence is at the highest rates of any profession in the United States of America. So these white male police officers, they beating their wives and their kids, and they killing themselves.
But in context to the book you was talking about, The Power Elite,
It's
right?
a different group of white men.
Check it out, though. Here's what I'm saying, though. That group of white men understands that value of that white man as well.
They do.
Right?
They do.
I can use this guy.
They do.
Right? Now, juxtapose that to our community.
Yes.
Right? Because I bet you $1 to a dime, and I don't know these numbers verbatim. I don't know the data. But if you did the data, and I almost guarantee they would line up. Those people in lower socioeconomic environments, even in the context of our communities, right? And I don't even believe we have like classes. I think we all kind of really, class is a fallacy in our community, right? Because 63rd is walking distance from 43rd and King Drive, and 43rd and King Drive has $1 million homes. What's the difference?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Your kid is up against the same odds as the guy on 63rd Street. It's really that simple, right? But in philosophy, the guy on 43rd Street doesn't value the guy on 63rd Street like the power elite sees a value opportunity in the white lower class.
Absolutely.
All of these people are necessary in the paradigm of us maintaining this power complex, right? So when we go to political office, and political office being one of the upper echelon career paths in our community, when I say that 120,000 is really where you top out at,
Yeah.
to be an alderman, you fucking won. You won the black lottery.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But when you get there, you don't leverage the young boys in the streets in the same way that, let's say, I don't know, a Chase would or a Rockefeller would, because they know it's necessary. It's necessary. So if we, going back to the Amos Wilson theory again,
yes,
we must master and conquer that in which we are born into.
Absolutely.
Right? In order to do that, to your theory of collectivism, you got to leverage them. But when we get there, we abandon them. And I'm using those in philosophy, the guy holding political office and the guy on the streets. It's like it's a huge gap. But there's even this middle ground in between that huge gap align themselves with in my mind, the more beta behavior of the politician. Right? But if you do not have that Salim kind of authority figure,
absolutely,
none of this academia, articulation shit over here, it's just that. It's just words.
Right.
You got to be able to back that up by some form of threat.
Right.
And you scared to do that. King Von ain't.
That's right.
Right? But to the point of the white power elite and the police officer at the bottom, that police officer at the bottom, just like the young boy in 63rd, he's also invisible to the white power elite. And he knows
yes, he is. And he's angry.
It's the same dynamic. It's just different positions on the board.
And see, his problem is, instead of accepting that he's being treated like we being treated, he projects, because he looks at male white supremacy as the goal, and he sees him. So what he tries to do is align himself with this and project his anger onto us, the young black male, when in reality, he got more in common with the young black male in the hood.
Absolutely.
In the pantheon of this whole thing, the police officer got more in common with the hood than he does with the power elite.
Which brings into question the structure of capitalism or the structure of race, which is more damaging, right? I know we got to take a quick break. This is Toussaint Werner. I'm talking to Brother Lance Williams. You are tuned in to MUWAKKIL'S World, and we will be right back.
WIFTVPM.
You're listening to I Said What I Said with Toussaint Werner and Herb Howard.
Well, what was the power of the Bible? Most motherfuckers couldn't read. So the Bible legitimately changed the world because motherfuckers began to learn to read. And once I can learn to read, wait a minute, I can question some of this bullshit you talking about.
What school you go to, though?
It don't matter.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Well,
I went to Dunbar.
Yes!
That's how Dunbar.
Oh, it's good.
People disrespect the city schools. This Chicago. And I'm a motherfucking genius.
And that's on period.
Shout out to the mighty man. Nah, I'm just playing. But seriously though, think about it though, right? The Bible legitimately changed the world, right?
What's up, good people? You're listening to I Said What I Said with Toussaint Werner and Herb Howard live on What's In It for the Black People Media, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m.
Tune in every Sunday. Don't miss it. Live from the West Center for the Black People Media Studios. It is the Kickoff Kickback. Join the conversation with the brothers, Eugene McIntosh, Herb Howard, and myself, Terrence Tomlin.
We got analysis live from the stadium. The brother Joe Lewis will be following through. We got great guests coming in, players, personnel, people.
Say what? We do our thing every Sunday from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, taking you right up to kickoff.
We picking the full slate of NFL games. We talking fantasy football. Gino got you covered on all the bets. It's a kickback.
Make sure y'all join the conversation. Smash that like button. Smash that share button. And continue to help us push the culture forward.
Don't miss it every Sunday from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, live here from the West Center for the Black People Media Studios.
I've never been lucky at love, no never. I've never been good at holding on. A heart broken so many
Ron, what's that?
Steve Huff. That's one of Don's artists.
That's dope. I rock with that. Is that also the song I always ask about? Was kind of got that like 1970s kind of pimp background music in it. Dude is dope. I'm gonna have to check dude out. You are tuned in to MUWAKKI'L's World. I am Toussaint Werner. You are listening to Brother Lance Williams break down the understanding of black masculinity. It gets deep in here, specifically when the mics turn off. But we're trying to bring that conversation to you all as well, man. We just can't stop talking when the mics turn off, though, because it's such an interesting conversation to me, you know. You've been talking a lot about building an institution, right? And I fully agree with that. The how is where I struggle.
Yeah.
Right? Specifically, even in the context when you talk about your book, you know, the Almighty Black Peace Stone Nation, or the Gangster Disciples, or the Black Disciples, are all, in a lot of ways, those serve as institutions. We just talked about culture.
Yes.
Right? And you said that the definitive of culture. Break that down for me. What'd you say?
Well, I said, you know, my basic definition of culture is the expression of the relationship between a group of people and their environment.
Right?
Right.
So if I was to align myself with that definition,
right, then
the BDs, the GDs, the Stones, the Lords, go down the line.
Yes, sir.
All of them have a unique understanding of their environment and their collectiveness within that environment.
Yeah.
You know
and they produce an identity based on that relationship.
So
right? They got a culture.
Quick story, man.
Yes, sir.
This past year, our brother TJ Crawford, TJ Crawford, and a lot of other friends put together this kind of caravan to celebrate Juneteenth.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Shout out to TJ.
Shout out to TJ. And it was a beautiful experience, man. We riding through the city on the back of this. We was kind of like on the lead little truck. It's almost like a parade. We just kind of like picked up people. And we went from the west side to the south side. And we finalized it like in the hundreds. But by the time we got to like Stony Island, let's say like around 67th and Stony Island, man, it might have been a couple hundred cars behind us.
Wow.
It was a really beautiful experience. So me and TJ riding on the first car. TJ has the megaphone and he's shouting all these kind of Black Power epithets, right? And when we got to Parkway, all along the whole ride, don't care about how desolate the neighborhood was. When we put up the Black Power fist, everybody responded with the Black Power fist.
Wow.
When we got to Parkway, a young brother dropped the rakes.
Yes.
And I was so disappointed, right, in that moment. And then I thought about it later and I said, well, no. This is his understanding of community. That's really who he aligns himself with. It's not a black philosophy that really exists in totality. We don't have this kind of universal idea of blackness.
Right.
And that shit hurt me more than him dropping the rakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, see, one of the things we always had to keep in mind about O-Block is it's historic. I mean, it's a historic community that has been historically isolated and has been historically the dividing line between the, I mean, and it's interesting because when you look at street organizations, right, and even within the have-nots, there is a classism, right? So, you know, Natalie and I write about it in our book where there was a perception, and you will know this growing up in the hood, you know, and having experiences with the organizations, that the Stones have always, on the South Side, have always been the street organization that has been kind of the exclusive kind of area.
Yeah, they were sexy gangbangers.
Yeah, you know, intellectual gangbangers, right? And kind of have looked down on the disciples as
they was dirty folks.
The dirty folks
That's
and ignorant, right? So that's a culture, right? That's a cultural identity. And so in order to deal with that psychologically, because that's a hell of a burden to try to get dirty folks, you know what I mean? So what folks, but the reality was that they were really the salt of the earth. They were the grassroots. David and them were the grassroots, you know, people of the earth, right? But have always felt disrespected and appreciated by the larger community. And so whenever somebody come from outside of their space, they don't care what it is. You know, so the guy throwing the rakes down, you know, he BD. And so he throwing the rakes down to say he don't even know who y'all really are.
No context.
It's just that you ain't from over.
You ain't from over here.
Right. And so he throw the race down. What he should have did was the alignment that y'all bringing in Juneteenth and Black Power was more associated with the Stones. He should have been doing something to disrespect the Stones, not no GDs. But the reality is he don't
Drop
know.
the 5.
Yeah, he should have been dropping 5s or something, cracking pyramids or something. But he didn't. It's just that's what has been lost. It's a level of just not knowing anymore, right? But O Block, just their structure, they backs are up, have always been up against the wall. They fighting the world, and so anybody that come over here, we want to show you that y'all ain't with us, and we on our own.
So even in that class structure within the downtrodden, right, that context is interesting to me because I kind of grew up in and out of Parkway. Right? At least I played ball in Parkway all my life. Like from 6 to 24, every Sunday was in the middle of Parkway hooping. Right, my uncles are from Parkway, and I grew up hooping with my uncles. So when I look at the Vaughns and the Dirks and the Keefs, in a lot of ways, I probably grew up with their daddies or their uncles, or I'm sure I know him. I know Vaughn's dad, his real daddy for sure. And even in those times, not to say Parkway was, didn't have violence, but it was kind of a small blip on the map.
Yeah.
In comparison to, let's say, like I always went to school on the low end, right? So went to Beasley, went to Dunbar. So if you think about that in context, you passing through Robert Taylor.
Yeah.
You passing through Stateway. These are like towns, full cities on these
communities. They small cities.
They small cities. So in comparison to whatever the hell was going on in Parkway, it just, at least in my experience, right? When I was experiencing it, I didn't feel the level of threat in Parkway that, let's say, I felt in Stateway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a different kind of experience. You say what, Ron?
Or the Ickies or the EXTs.
Or even the Ickies. Right? I used to get my hair braided in the Ickies back in the day. You know what I mean? It was a very different experience unless I felt kind of free. In a lot of ways, Parkway was like the upper crust of the CHA living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now, again, when we start thinking about black economics, right? And we start thinking about how we're leveraging all of that valuable land now, how the city demolished all that land and then moved all those people to, different kind of communities, right? Parkway, in a lot of ways, is it the only last standing CHA function?
Well, it's not CHA. It never has been CHA.
It wasn't CHA?
It was subsidized housing, low income, but never a CHA. And again, that has because it wasn't CHA, because if it was CHA, it wouldn't even be there anymore, right? So, and we know what has happened. And again, Parkway has always been, subsidized kind of housing, private subsidized housing, not Chicago Housing Authority.
Kind of like Princeton Park.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
They just sold Princeton Park. That's the only reason I even know that. Like I always thought Princeton Park was CHA too.
Right. And see, what happened was right across the street, the Calumet buildings was CHA. Right. And so it's always that division, which was a class division, that we different. We got a little bit more than y'all have over here, which it caused a lot of tension. And then on the other side, on the east side, now you bringing in, the Woodlawn community, which was considered black people that moved to Woodlawn had a little more.
A little upper crust.
Yeah, a little more than those who were coming back towards west, towards Inglewood, right? But, and that's one of the things that, I try to write about. I try to pay particular attention to in the books that I write, and that is to deal with the policy, the racist policy, city policy implemented that causes all of this confusion in our community. Like if you look at the problems of Inglewood or the Woodlawns or where O Block is, there are or even in this deep, because even if you look at the fact that Keith and Dirk and Lil Von and all of them, King Von, they produced the music. They are the fathers of drill music, which has taken the world by storm, and the expression of the music is a direct result of racist city school policy.
Absolutely.
Where Von and them and the brothers from O Block and Keith and them in particular were supposed to go to the Hyde Park or those are their neighborhood schools, but they were forced Keith and them were forced to go to Diet. And Diet being right across the street.
And being ground zero for drill.
Being ground zero for drill. That's where it was born. But it was born based on racist city of Chicago public policy, where our schools were dismantled. They were turned into
all redlining and housing segregation.
Yeah. They would turn into charter schools and privatize and this type of thing. And then the kids suffer from that. And again, culture, the relationship with your environment. Now you got to go to Diet, right? You got to go through all of these different sets to get to school, back and forth to school. Right across the street from the school is one of the most historic MC sets, right? Young Money, right across the street. So you got to get through them boys every day.
Man, I'm laughing. I live right across the street from Diet.
Yeah.
Like legitimately right across the street.
Snakes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the Young Money whole set. So let me just say this. When Von died, like I always kind of had this like, what's the word I want to use? I've kind of like, so Pac-Man and King Louie, like I know them.
Okay.
You know, and like for real know them, right? Pac-Man died, really was the father of drill music. He really created drill music, right? Louis kind of took what Pac-Man was doing, rode the wave. It didn't really take off with Louis. It took off with the generation that kind of Louis birthed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's Keith in them.
That's Keith in them.
Right.
Right? So Keith and them are so much younger than me, and I'm starting to recognize the implications of age, right? I'm a child of hip hop, but in essence, I don't know shit about drill.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a whole different genre in my mind. Right. But when Von got killed, I don't know, man. Something just took me, right? And I just kind of went down this rabbit hole of who was Shorty, right? And in essence, that took me down another rabbit hole of, damn, what really is going on with this drill music shit?
Yeah.
Right? Because it extends way beyond the music.
Yes, it does.
Right? And it kind of goes back to that same thing I said. It really, in a lot of ways, sparked that idea about invisibility.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So as I'm going down this rabbit hole of drill, I'm starting to look at, and mind you, I just said I live directly across the street from Diet. Right? Raised both my children right there. My son is now 15 years old. Right? Now, he's had a different experience than most of the kids in my neighborhood.
Okay.
Because I've had the access to put him in different kind of school systems.
Yeah.
Right? So he lives there, but not really.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
His experience is not there.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? But, I'm sorry, but I see these kids. I've seen these kids over the years grow into who they've become.
Yeah.
Now, context though. I see Shorty as Shorty from XYZ, a little XYZ.
Yes.
As I'm going through this drill music rabbit hole, I'm seeing Shorty that I see every day, and I'm saying, wait a minute.
Yes.
This is, and again, context. I had no clue. So then I start putting the pieces together, and I'm saying, damn, that means Diet is ground zero for all of this behavior.
Yes, it is.
All this is regular childhood beefs.
Yes, it is.
With people with pistols, access to pistols,
right,
and lack of empathy.
Yeah. But and then taking it a step further, the reason that what Diet became in the early 2000s, the 2010s, I should say, was a dumping ground for kids who could not make it into that. They didn't have the test scores and whatnot, and to get into the specialty high schools that were a product of the dismantling of public education in Chicago. So basically what you did was you took all of the kids from surrounding the Mid-South, down from Parkway, in Woodlawn, in Inglewood, all the way down to Brownsville. Anybody that couldn't make it in those neighborhoods, that couldn't get into King, couldn't get into Kenwood, couldn't get into Hyde Park, what you did was you took them and you threw them into this dumping school.
Forced
them. And threw them all into a pot. And drill music, then with that second generation of young guys, they then become, they express what they experienced, and it took the world by storm.
I want to explore that further. We got to go to a quick break. You are tuned in to MUWAKKI'L's World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is my brother Lance William. We'll be right back.
WIIFTBPM.
WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. you and me.
Introducing your trusted source for high-quality black emojis, better known as Blackmoji. We believe black is beautiful, and that beauty should be reflected in the digital market. Now there is an app that does just that, starting with Black Greek letter organizations. Blackmoji D9 offers more than an emoji app. It is a cultural experience of black excellence. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store to access a specially curated catalog of emojis representing the Divine Nine. Use the emojis to celebrate Black Greek events, acknowledge current events, support social causes, and learn about esteemed Black Greek members who blaze the trail of Black history. A portion of every subscription goes toward a scholarship fund specifically for members of Black Greek letter organizations to help keep the legacy alive. Download the Blackmoji app today.
Jackson.
If you could make up a social media holiday, what would it be?
Randy said National Don't Let No One Put You Down Day.
No one. What you gonna do? So when they say something crazy, you slap them?
Be like me said. Remy said a Jukathon Day.
Man, we're about 60 years old. I'd be done had a heart attack.
You gotta get your heart rate up.
Okay, that not that far.
All right, Mario said my favorite one. My friends and I do what we call National Call Off from Work Day.
As a business owner, I don't.
You don't like that, yeah.
I don't like that.
Because I'm the boss of this family. We got Marcus Garvey Day from Remy too.
Oh, Marcus Garvey Day. All right, what will we do on Marcus Garvey Day?
Call off from work.
I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. That would be great. Okay?
Yeah, right. Well, every black holiday has something to do with calling off from work.
You're cool. I'm out.
About National Join a Positive Black Organization Day, because I don't want to be recruited. I don't want to be recruited and the brothers be like, thank you. Thank you. How about National Tell White People the Truth Day? Tell them how you really feel.
You can't handle the truth.
Why don't we call that National Black People Get Locked Up Day?
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Hello.
The most dangerous show in the morning. Check. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat. 'Cause I don't want my boat to be right. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat. Oh, no, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. I'm telling you just, I like it like this. Keep this just like this. And you should know by now. I like it.
We coming back in, man. You are tuned in to MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is Dr. Lance Williams to my right. Again, man, these off mic conversations are always more interesting than these on mic conversations. We was getting into redlining and housing discrimination and how it affects the educational system for our kids and how that creates certain energies and frequencies and paradigms to where, we're dealing with what we're dealing with now from the street level.
Yes.
But it's all a response to racist practices by, and I'm going to say the city of Chicago, but again, it goes back to context of the book, The Power Elite.
Yes, it does.
Right?
Yes, it does.
It's just the paradigm.
Yes, it does. And to get back to this whole idea of masculinity, right? And the problem. See, there's a couple of things that we got to keep in mind. So my experience, this is just my experience. Mm-hmm. My theory is that there is and this is not saying this is the correct theory or what, this is just what I'm, what I have gathered in my 30 plus professional years of working with specifically with young African-American males, particularly ones who find themselves, affiliated with street organizations, right? What I'm seeing is that there's a particular personality of black males that end up the most marginalized, right? This is not even something for all black males, but it's a specific group, right? And I believe that this society, and this is not I don't believe in a conspiracy of people getting together to target anything. I think the conspiracy is the culture of white supremacy is the conspiracy, so to speak, that it produces the marginalization of black folks in general, but young black males in specific, right? So this is what I have to say to young brothers who find themselves in a bad situation. I say, I want you to go back and I want you to think about your early childhood in school as a first grader, second grader, third grader, right? As a little black boy at a little black school with a black teacher. And I want you to think about some of the experiences that you had, right? Number one of the experiences was that your expression of being highly alert, being having a challenge of being able to sit in the classroom, sit in the seat, look straight ahead, and for 6 or 8 hours a day without paying attention. So you got in trouble a lot for being considered in other people's business, looking around, talking to other people. But if you look at those kind of things that these boys get labeled as, really these are expressions of intelligence, right? Being quick-witted, right? And it has nothing to do with, your academic, like grades or test scores, that you can express intelligence in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is to be alert, to be quick-witted, to be to pay attention and to coordinate different things going on, to take charge in a classroom, right? To have a good sense of humor. These are characteristics of leaders. Like if you look at the standard research on what do leaders demonstrate? They demonstrate intelligence. They are take charge kind of people. They have a sense of humor, right? They speak truth to power. They don't have a problem speaking up, right? Well, what happens if you're this kind of little boy and you do this in the classroom in a Chicago public school? If you paying it, you paying attention to stuff going on in the classroom, you cracking jokes,
shunned. You're
gonna get shunned. And after a certain period of time, then you find yourself as a little boy. But you're a little boy, and you getting in trouble all the time. You can't really express, right? You can't defend yourself clearly. The teacher is the teacher, and whatever the teacher says. But it's not something that you're comfortable with. So what you find is after a period of time, probably about third grade, fourth grade, Jawanza talks about it in this fourth grade failure syndrome. You see little black boys starting to fail in school because they feel uncomfortable, particularly the leaders. And by the time they get to sixth grade, then they basically checked out altogether. Now, if they don't come from a family that can keep them focused and in good standing, ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to end up dropping out. And then when they drop out, they're in the streets. And once they're in the streets, then of course the streets take over and they end up catching the case.
Cycle.
Right. So if you trace it all the way back, what you're finding is many of these boys were the leaders, right? Now, the ones who were not leaders, who did listen, who did not take charge, who did not speak truth to power, they're celebrated, right? And those are the ones that become successful, and then they become the leaders in the community, but in essence, by their nature, they always been beta. Yes, right. And so that's what we have. And I'm not saying that if you ended up being that kind of dude, that is something wrong with you. It's just the way this thing is organized, it works to our demise. And so now all of the guys that really have the leadership qualities, innate leadership qualities, get ostracized and marginalized and get labeled as criminals, and the ones who were the followers get to be the leaders. And now we see why our community is in the way that it's in. Right? So I think as it relates to that a lot of that is attached to black masculinity, because there are certain ways that we are going to express ourselves as black men in our culture that makes having success in this society, like for us, it's stuff. I got a PhD, but it's things that people just ain't gonna mess with. They ain't messing with me because the fear of dealing with a black male. Look, if you're thinking about the last time I checked, it was almost 50% of young black males, the ages of 15 to 30-something, are either unemployed or out of school.
So it's actually high, at least in this city, it's higher.
It's much higher because
from 18 to 44, it's like a 47% unemployment rate.
And when you think about unemployment, you got to think about that's an indicator of those who are actively looking for jobs. So those who
ain't even actively looking.
So you're talking about 80%, over 80% of young black males are out of school and jobless. Now, when you get to a certain threshold, that shows you that that's not an individual. In other words, we try to attach that to the failure of the individual black man. Now, that's a systemic problem. Where what is that saying? They're saying that people are afraid to hire black males. They don't even want to deal with them just because you're a black male. And until we deal with that systemic issue, we're going. And so what I'm saying to young brothers is that, look, man, we got to do something different, right? A lot of that has to do with entrepreneurship, because this going to school and going to get a low paying, that ain't gonna work, bro. Yeah, that's not working.
And that world is being erased.
It's being erased.
Right, that opportunity is not even,
especially with this virus thing.
Yeah, that opportunity is not even going to exist anymore.
No, it's not.
Right, we're moving away from a service economy.
That's
so
right.
If that's all you got to offer, that shit is a wrap.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We got to take a quick break, but I want to get back into that idea of black malehood or black masculinity in regards to like growing through the ranks of school systems, right?
Okay.
And I got my own particular experience just as a black boy who came up through these systems, but now as a father to a black boy, it's a very different understanding. And maybe it was the exact same paradigm. It's just I'm viewing it from a different perspective now, right? I'm observing it instead of living through it as I lived through it as, being a child versus looking at how my child is being treated through this paradigm.
Yes.
But we're going to get right back into that when we come back from this break. This is MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is Lance Williams. We'll be right back.
WIIFTBPM.
WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
This is retired State Senator Ricky Hendon. This is my new song, Be My Christmas. It's on my House Party CD, produced by house music icon King Farley. It's available on my website, HollywoodHendon.com. And this is our new song, We Getting Lit. The album also has songs like Rona Money. Get the House Party CD in time for Christmas and New Year's Eve.
This is the king of house music, Farley Jack Master Funk, and I endorse Hollywood Ricky Hendon. Let's go to work.
Food, culture, impact. What's in it for the Black People Media is proud to support The Woodlawn, located at 1200 East 79th Street. The Woodlawn is an innovative economic center for the entire family. Stop by and try our jerk-inspired menu. Plus, get details on our new Igloo Dining experience. Restaurant, event space, cultural space. For more info about reservations or our COVID-19 friendly space, visit us online at www.thewoodlawn1200.com.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water. And I think of all the things, what you're doing. And in my head I paint a picture.
come on over. Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you
We are back. You are tuned into MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. I am having a conversation with the good brother, Dr. Lance Williams. Before we left, we was getting to the idea, or I wanted to bring up the idea of my own personal experience through the Chicago school system. And not just Chicago school system, I'm going to say the American school system. Because at 14 and a half, I got kicked out of Chicago public schools.
Wow.
Because I got in trouble, and I ended up having to move to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I finished high school in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was a completely different experience than the experience I was having in Chicago. And then I wanted to, also talk about that from the perspective of being a parent of a black boy.
Right.
And some of his experiences, right? So it's a different thing when you're living an experience versus when you're observing an experience, right? So while living the experience, I just thought, it just was normal, or maybe sometimes I was actually fucking up. Maybe I am the guy they trying to label me as, you know what I mean? But to see it from the perspective of a parent, it had a very different imprint on my mind, right? I was telling you a story just offline about my son attending the school. And it was a Montessori school. And I'm talking early, five, pre-kindergarten, whatever age that is, And they brought us in one day and saying, he just wasn't cutting the mustard. We think we're going to have to hold him back. What are you going to hold him back for? He ain't even in the grade, you know what I mean? So in the conversation, man, and this is where it gets interesting. I told you the story basically offline. They had us come in, observe the kid. The kid did all the answers. He did a test. He got all the answers right. He got more answers right than any other kid in the classroom. Wow. But his work wasn't neat, and he wasn't quiet when he was doing the work, right? Now, in the construct of Montessori, it says, once you finish doing whatever your responsibility is, you can kind of go do whatever you want to do. My son had mastered that. Once I finish this shit, I can go play basketball. And that's what he did, right? But their pushback was that he was loud, and he was not neat and organized. And I thought about that in context, and this is just a cultural understanding.
Yes.
We loud.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In our communities, we express ourselves
they call
differently.
It emotional responsiveness.
Yeah.
And
there was this kind of disconnect in valuing that or understanding that in that Montessori structure, right? So immediately I pulled my son about that school.
Yes.
This is some bullshit, right? But here's where it gets interesting. A year later, that school calls me back. Not to bring my kid back, but they want me to sit on this board to deal with why they're losing black students, why they can't keep black students.
Yes.
And I sat in on, and I'm intrigued too, guys. I want to know what y'all think. I do, right? And I sat in on this board kinda, and I was probably one. I was the only, maybe it was two black men in the room, right? I was the only one in my socioeconomic class. I was definitely the one that kind of was rooted in this kind of black cultural philosophy. And there was one other black woman, but the rest of the people in the group were white people who had adopted black children.
Wow.
Which was interesting in itself. Right? And they would do these little exercises, and the exercises were supposed to get to some understanding of how we can operate with diversity. In a lot of ways, in my mind, it was like racial ambiguity. Like, it was some bullshit to me, But I remember one specific kind of like icebreaker they did. And they set up this thing on the wall, and it was kind of like the spin the wheel of fortune kind of deal. And it had poor, middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy as like the quadrants that you could fall into. And they rolled the thing, and they, everybody in the group was supposed to walk into the quadrant that they thought they fit into. And the first roll, it went to wealthy, right? And let's say it was 10 people in the room. 9 of their asses walked to the wealthy box.
Wow.
Right? And I had to ask the question, like, wait a minute. How we qualifying wealth?
Yes.
Because I just couldn't believe that all you motherfuckers think y'all fit in this box? And, they gave some number, whatever, but all their ass stayed in the box.
Okay.
Right? And it just dawned on me. I was like, damn, this is really a different world. Because without question, everybody just went to the box, you know. And throughout the duration of that experience or that experiment, you would have these conversations, and in my mind, I was like, damn, these people really don't grasp it. And I thought, and that really stuck with me for a long time. And it stuck with me because it started to really define what privilege really was. It's the fact that you don't got to think about it. These questions don't have to come across your board. You don't have to think about what it means to be black when you walk outside your house. You don't have to worry about the bill collector, the police pulling up behind. All this shit really don't matter to you. So you're comfortable in your philosophy about anything that doesn't look like your experience because you assume that this is the experience. You know what I mean? And it's just interesting. And to the point you made offline about the preparing for power conversation, right? Because that school recruited my son. For no other reason than he was black and they had a relationship with my niece. And I said they had to meet some kind of quota or something, and you said no, it's probably because they wanted him there so they understand that there's nothing to fear from none of these kind of people. So you have an understanding of these people, and I think that's I think that's more interesting. I never had that thought.
When you are preparing your children for power, real and true power, then it's important for those children to have an experience with it doesn't have to be too diverse, but I'll just read to you what they say here. They say, look, they say that the founders of the schools recognized that unless their sons and grandsons were willing to take up the struggle for the preservation of their class interests, privilege would slip from the hands of the elite, and eventually power would pass to either a competing elite or to a rising underclass. These boys were meant to become soldiers for their class and to become combat ready, right? And so in order to be prepared to be a dominant force, you have to have experiences with all of those that you're going to dominate. So diversity is not there because of a touchy-feely, we feel good about, we want to bring so that we, sensitive to the needs of black people. No, they bringing black people in so their kids can become familiar dealing with.
Know thy enemy.
Yeah, and not just working class blacks or affluent blacks, but we want some poor ones too, because we're going to dominate all of it, right? So that's how they look at diversity. Right, and you have to be careful because when you put your children in that type of environment, then that's like you fattening up snakes. I mean, you feeding frogs to snakes.
I agree, man. I think it was the worst experience. It was one of the worst decisions I ever made as a father, right? And me and my wife had a lot of discomfort in making them kind of decisions.
And I think in my family as well. We live in the hood too. And knowing that Chicago has an apartheid school system, the reality of us, how community schools, neighborhood, like if you really think about how our schools are organized, in order to get a decent education, black folks got to leave out of their neighborhoods to go to some schools that are predominantly white or predominantly non-black, which is crazy because then what happens is you cream off the best and brightest from the black community and you send them away, and then you take the rest and you just throw them into some non-functioning schools. And then you expect that those who leave their communities are they never gonna come back.
Man, listen, I'm gonna give you another experience I had. So because my son was a standout athlete young.
Yes.
I got a lot of offers to coach basketball teams at these private schools that he was at because they saw his progression and they were like, man, how can we get the rest of the kids to move like this? So it was at one point I was coaching like a 8th grade team in one of these schools. My son he was like 3rd grade type of deal. But they saw, again, like I said, the progress of my son. They said, man, you could do something with these 8th graders. So I would watch these 8th graders in practice, and they would be talking, it was a regular 14-year-old boy talking trash, and they could hoop. But as soon as we showed up for the games, they all cowered, right? Every time we showed up. And I said, okay, I grasp what's going on here. They're scared, you know what I mean? So I get them back to practice one day, and I say to them, man, any of y'all ever had a fight before, right? And I'm thinking 14-year-old athlete, I don't know how you could not have had a fight at this point. You know what I mean? Nobody raised their hand. I'm confused by this. Like, fuck you, man, you ain't never had a fight. It just wasn't natural to me. It wasn't normal. So I said, man, you ain't never got in a fight with one of the players on the team, just some conflict? I said, what about your homies in the neighborhood? And when I said your homies in the neighborhood, they was like, man, Mr. Werner, I don't go outside of my neighborhood. I ain't allowed outside of my neighborhood. I don't have friends in my neighborhood. And I thought about that. And I'm saying, this is an elite black school.
Yes.
Right? There's no aid in funding this tuition. So if you hear your parents is legitimately paying for this shit.
Right.
You couldn't possibly come from one of them neighborhoods where your ass can't go outside. It just didn't register to me. You know what I mean? And I started to ask them where they live, and they was telling me where they live. And it's like, Mr. Warren, I live in Hyde Park, or Mr. Warren, I live in Bronzeville. And I was like, you can't go outside. It just didn't register to me. But then I thought about it in this context. These kids go to this elite grammar school. They're going to all graduate from here. They're going to all go to elite high schools.
Yes.
They're going to leave them elite high schools and go to elite colleges.
Yes.
And they're going to come back and have elite careers in our community.
Yes.
All while never having a relationship to our community.
That's how it's going.
So who the fuck are they serving?
That's how it's going. That's how it's going.
That's exactly how it's going. And I had to do some self-reflection because I was essentially raising my son in a very similar manner.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it wasn't even on purpose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I said to myself, I can't raise no lion on no leash. It's just impossible to do. So I started allowing him to navigate our neighborhood on his own.
Yes.
And a lot of my family members was like, you crazy. But I understand that if I want him to be the kind of man that I would desire him to be, he got to have a relationship with all of this.
Right.
Same kind of diversity concept with the white folks. You got to know every possible aspect of this environment.
Yes, absolutely.
But we shun it and run from it because, again, we don't even like to identify ourselves with that lower class of person.
Yeah. See, the thing that is important in community institutions, even if it's a public school, right? In the tradition of the community, let's say you got a community high school and you have, a diverse group of kids that go to that school. You got some kids that are high functioning. I'm talking about in the hood, right? So you got some kids that are doing well, and then you got the gangbangers, right? But they all help each other in helping them to learn the reality. So the kids that are the high functioning kids, right, in terms of academics, they can learn from the mistakes of the youth who are in the streets. But the kids in the streets can look at the ones that are doing well as a role model. But when you take that top group out and you send them out of the neighborhood someplace else, you've undermined the whole growth and development of the neighborhood for generations, right? Because you've disconnected, those forces. And so a lot of my research, especially around youth violence, argues that there are three prevailing streams. I call them toolkits of black youth. You got one that has an Anglo-cultural expression. These are African American kids who basically are the ones that are doing well in school. They have more of a conformist kind of worldview. They look at their communities as damaged, and their goal is to follow the rules, to get out of their communities, to never return. Then you got another group of kids that are in the middle that I call the marginal toolkit, which these are kind of kids that ghetto fabulous, right? These are kids that kind of see their communities as messed up as well, but they will use different types of antisocial tools to become, and all of this is about trying to adjust to your environment, right? but they see their communities as flawed and pathological, and they also want to never return. I mean, they don't see any future for themselves. But then you got another group of kids that are kind of like the activist kids who use, I call that the Afro-cultural toolkit. These are kids who learn from their ancestors and the elders, and they see their communities not as pathological, but as oppressed. And their goal is to come back and help their neighborhoods and communities. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how to retool our young people between these three toolkits so that we could produce young people who see the community as see themselves as obligated to their communities and want to help them through service.
We got to take a quick break. I want to dive deep into that when we come back from this break. You are tuned into MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. This is Dr. Lance Williams. We'll be right back.
WIFTV-PM.
Hey y'all, this is Salim MUWAKKIL from MUWAKKIL'S World. In case you missed the last discussion, this is what you missed.
There was a time when there was a large-scale mythology that African people had no endurance. We were only good for sprinting.
Right.
And that was our forte. Other than that, we were useless in marathon races. Establishing your patrimony on the land. If you bury the dead, that means that this land is forever in your family.
Who are our ancestors, really? We are the living ancestors to a whole genealogical line going back hundreds of thousands, millions of years that we carry within us living today. Everyone who preceded us. Mm-hmm. You know, however, that conception took place, whether it was violently, with rape, or whatever the case, but we are them living today.
That's why it's important to understand our capacity, man. Our capacity is unlimited. We have unlimited potential.
Absolutely.
So make sure you tune in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11 to 1 p.m. on What's in It for the Black People Media.
Food, culture, impact. What's in it for the Black People Media is proud to support The Woodlawn, located at 1200 East 79th Street. The Woodlawn is an innovative economic center for the entire family. Stop by and try our jerk-inspired menu. Plus, get details on our new Igloo dining experience. Restaurant, event space, cultural space. For more info about reservations or our COVID-19 friendly space, visit us online at www.thewoodlawn1200.com.
Here to me, always sexy as can be, watching every move you make, no more dreaming about today. From the first time I saw you, I knew you'd be mine. See, I knew that you would be mine. Set it off. See, we don't need no clothes at all. Your private invite to this party. I'll be all night catering to your body. From the first time I saw you, I knew you'd be mine. Are we on?
Welcome back to MUWAKKIL'S World. I am Toussaint Werner. I am joined by the good brother, Dr. Lance Williams. Man, we getting caught up in these conversations offline, and we struggling to get back on time. Ron in there knocking on the window and shit. Before we went off, you was talking about the levels, the 3 levels, the Anglo-cultural, the managing toolkit, and the activist kids.
Yes.
Right? And how do we kind of blend those 3? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So each group of those youth, and I'm not saying every kid fits neatly into each one of those categories. I mean, they kind of have some fluidity between the 3. But in general, we can classify young African-American youth into one of these 3 categories. Again, the Anglo-cultural group, they use the tools of mainstream society. You know, they use the ideal of conformity, of material possession, right, of following rules and regulations. Those kids tend to have a conformist ideology. Their perspective of their community, unfortunately, of the black community, is that the black community is pathological, and that what their plan is to kind of follow the rules and regulations to get out, to escape this community, never to return. Obviously, we can see the problems with that. Although these kids may be doing well in school, they're not socialized to see the community as something that they're responsible for and that they should be obligated to through service. So ultimately, they want to leave and never come back. Then there's another group of kids which popular culture kind of exacerbates their conditions, but these kids are kind of the ghetto fabulous hood kids. I call it the marginal toolkit, and they will use forms of antisocial behavior in order to try to adjust to their, lack of opportunities, right? They also see their communities as pathological, right? But the problem with them is that they feel like they don't have the wherewithal to have any impact on their neighborhood. So they feel like it's nothing that they can do to change or improve their neighborhood. Then you got a third group, which I call the Afro-cultural kids. These are kids that we tend to see be more involved with activism. Those are the Black Lives Matter kids, so to speak. They do well in school because they conform to respecting their elders and this type of thing. But the way they look at their community is different. They see their community not as pathological, but they see it as oppressed. And they feel like they're obligated to help solve the problems in their community. So even if they go off and get an education, they seem to find their way back to the neighborhood to try to improve it. What we have to do, because each group has a different set of tools that they use to navigate their social situation, we have to retool them. And I was just saying to you offline, we have a bad habit of the kids in the middle that are doing what we consider all of the wrong things, just like telling them to stop doing it. Like, for instance, one of the big things in the hood is, the way the guys wear their pants, showing their drawers and this type of thing. Pull up your pants and do this, and don't you know, if you doing that, you selling your it was if you was in jail doing that, that would be a way to say that you open the house, which is not true. If you talk to anybody that's been in a penitentiary, they'll tell you that's a myth, right? Nevertheless, instead of doing that, maybe if they gang affiliated, instead of telling them not to do something, retool them with something that supplements that tool. So take something like the marginal toolkit where a kid is gang banging. You can go to the Afro toolkit and get a rites of passage program that's helping young men form a collective identity in a pro-social way, and just swap them out, because all he's looking for is opportunity to be a part of a group that he can identify with, that's going to allow him to stand strong and to have some support. So just change the dynamic, right? And that way you can retool him and have him or her involved in pro-social behavior. But not addressing it from that perspective makes it difficult to change the behavior.
So when I think about those 3 groups, I was just giving you kind of this anecdotal understanding, when the mics was off, about my own experience, right? And it's a very unique experience in the sense that I grew up in this neighborhood called West Chesterfield, right? And at the time, West Chesterfield was the wealthiest all-black community in all of America.
Mhm.
Now, that's a play on words.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because there's probably like 3 families that stabilized the economic income of that entire community.
The whole community.
Of the whole community,
Yeah.
right? Which really speaks to how much lack there is in our
Yes.
community. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So although it's the wealthiest all-black community in all of America, there's a dope house next door to my grandmama's house.
Mhm.
A legitimate whole house down the street.
Mhm.
You know, my friends were shooters and was getting shot. That shit
Mhm.
was a reality of our community. But much like my son's experience,
Mhm.
at the time, I had the opportunity to go to Beasley, which was the premier school
Mhm.
in Chicago at the time.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
For black youth.
For black youth,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So not only that, my father was also a entrepreneur, and he had access via his career path to kind of walk me through other environments that wasn't necessarily afforded to everybody else.
Yes.
Right? And I know we're about to go off air here, but I just want to make this point. Because what that experience, being my father's child,
Mhm.
being able to go to Beasley and still being entrenched in what really was the hood.
Yes.
It gave me the freedom to find value in every level of the black experience.
Yeah.
And what I recognized in most of my peers is that they were kind of pigeonholed to certain portions of the black experience,
Mhm.
right? And back to some anecdotal shit and about punishment and all that you were just talking about. I remember distinctively I got into an argument with my bus driver at Beasley because every kid was busting in Beasley,
Mhm.
right? Now, mind you, I come from a certain neighborhood that looked like a certain kind of way
Mhm.
from the outside looking in. And I remember one time I got into an argument with the bus driver. I was calling them all kind of punks and what I was going to do to him and all this shit. And instead of taking me back to my regular destination to get dropped off at, he in his mind said, you know, I know what I'm going to do to punish this kid. I'm going to take his ass to Loden Homes and drop him off in Loden Homes instead of where he's usually supposed to get dropped off at. This speaks volumes to me.
Yes.
Because one, it made me know that he was unaware of the kind of good dude I really was.
Okay.
One.
Yeah.
Right? And that you thought this was punishment.
Mm.
So it implicitly puts a value on Loden Homes that's not rooted in shit.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he drops me off at Loden Homes, and it's about 30, 40 little kids at the corner because everybody's just getting out of school.
Yeah.
And as soon as that bus door opens and I get off, everybody screams, "Two, what up?"
Yeah.
He was so pissed. But
Wow.
again, it's like, how do we make that the definitive, right?
Yes.
And it goes
Yeah.
back to love and finding value.
Yes.
Changing the value set.
Yes.
Right? Because you was born at that address and I was born at this address don't make you no different than.
That's right. That's
you know what I mean?
That's right.
We out of time, man. We surely appreciate you all checking out MUWAKKI'L's World. Again, I am Toussaint Werner. This is my brother Lance Williams.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Man, we appreciate you coming in, man. We can't wait till Salim
Yeah,
gets back. Get well soon, brother Salim.
Get well, Salim.
Peace out, man. Thanks for listening.
WIFTBPM.